is to help you understand the drivers that impact the price that you ultimately see on your invoice and help you build your knowledge and confidence around making hedging decisions. So hopefully that will be the outcome of today's session. So we'll kick off with some gas market essential knowledge, some basic terms and formulas that we'll be using going forward. So firstly, what is natural gas? Well, it's a commodity just like oil or gold. It's a commodity that's used to heat our homes. It's an essential function for some of your industrial processes, industrial machinery, and it's also used to generate electricity that helps keep the lights on. So then how do we purchase natural gas? So Ireland sources the majority of its gas from the UK, meaning that we participate in the NBP or the National Balancing Point, which is the British wholesale gas market. The unit for purchasing gas is known as pence per therm. So pence is sterling and therm is the unit of gas. And this unit is converted into kilowatt hours for the purposes of your invoices. So that's generally what you'll see on your invoices each month. So we have an example here that Joanne Limited bought 1,000 therms of the March 24 contract at 70 pence per therm. So this example will just show how we actually get from a pence per therm price into a euro per or cent per kilowatt hour price. So if we have 1,000 therms, we multiply that by the conversion rate of 29.3071, which will give in this example will give us 29,307 kilowatt hours. We then have our price. So our price in this instance is 70 pence per therm. So we divide the 70 pence by the exchange rate, which is kind of roughly 0.86 at the moment, and then divide again by 29.3071. And this will give us our cent per kilowatt hour rate, which in this case is 2.78. We then, to get the total cost of this gas, we multiply our volume in kilowatt hours, which is 29,307, by our cent per kilowatt hour price, which is 2.78, and divided by 100, which gives us a total cost of gas of €814.75. So that's just important for verifying the prices on your invoices. And in this example, we've just used the March contract, but you can forward purchase a volume for nearly any period in the future to secure a price for your budget, which we'll be talking a bit more about later. But for now, just some important terms linked to that. So in a lot of our kind of market material, we would refer to terms like the prompt. So the prompt is a commodity available for physical delivery for a period that can be broken down into components of less than a month. So within day ahead, balance of month, those type of contracts. The prompt can then be kind of also referenced as the spot market, but the spot market is slightly different. That's the contracts just for physical delivery today or tomorrow, so the within day and day ahead contracts. Beyond that, then we have the term curve. So curve contracts are a strip of forward prices ending at some point in the future. So generally, it's from the front month outward is when we're talking about the curve. So moving on then to our gas market participants. So we obviously have G&I, Gas Networks Ireland, and they're responsible for constructing, extending and maintaining our gas network here. They're also responsible for reading, locking, removing and installing meters. So as a customer or end user, you may have direct contact with G&I or indirect via your supplier. There's also Airvia then, which is a semi-state company responsible for the gas pipeline infrastructure. We then have our suppliers, so the registered gas shippers or licensed gas shippers, such as Flogas and the rest. We then have our energy regulator, which is the CRU. They're ultimately responsible for ensuring that energy is delivered to homes and businesses in a safe manner, that the price paid is fair. They're essentially there for customer protection. And then we have end users such as yourselves, residential, I&C, and then also generators. So as an end user, there are two ways in which you can be connected to the gas network. You can be either transmission or distribution connected. So the vast majority of meters would be connected to the distribution network, which is the slightly smaller pipelines or branch network, which are themselves connected to the larger transmission pipeline. sometimes you might see much kind of larger I&C businesses would be connected directly to the transmission line, because how you're connected can have a direct impact on your pass-through transportation charges that you will pay. So if you're distribution connected, you will pay transportation charges for both distribution and transmission pipelines because you're using both. Whereas if you are transmission connected, you will only pay for transmission transportation pass-through charges. Um, so at this stage, now that we know on a very local basis that the gas is delivered to your premises via the transmission and distribution pipelines, now let's take a bit of a wider look at where that gas is actually coming from. So in our map here, this shows an overview of the gas infrastructure in Ireland. The blue line there you can see is the existing pipeline. So that shows the transmission network across the country. We can also see there are two subsea interconnectors there that connects us to Moffat in Scotland, where we import the majority of our gas requirements from. At the moment, we import about 80% of our annual requirements from Scotland. The remaining 20%, or just under 20% now this year, comes from our indigenous supply there in Corrib. So you can see the red dot there shows the entry point for that at Ballinaboy. So as I said, Corrib, it's forecast to meet about 19% of ROI's annual requirements this year, but by 2026, it will be of limited use as the stocks there are depleting quite fast. So we're heavily reliant on shipped gas from the UK to meet our demand, which then ultimately begs the question, where does the UK then get their gas from? So moving on then to our overview of the gas infrastructure around Europe. So the UK have a far more diverse supply mix than Ireland, as we can see straight away. So the majority of their supply will come from the UK continental shelf up in the North Sea, their indigenous supply there. And then also then the Norwegian continental shelf or Norwegian North Sea supplies. There's a number of key pipelines like Vesterled and Langled, which will deliver gas from the North Sea into the UK. There's also the Rough Storage Facility, which is an offshore facility, which was actually closed back in 2017, but partly reopened in 2022, just at around 20% of its capacity. But even by just reopening at 20% capacity, increased the total storage capacity across the UK by about 50%, which is quite significant. Apparently, it'll eventually be converted into a facility for storing hydrogen. The UK is also connected to mainland Europe via the BBL pipeline between the UK and the Netherlands, and then also the interconnector pipeline between the UK and Belgium. And then we, of course, then also have numerous LNG terminals, so Southhook, Dragon, Milford Haven, and Isle of Grain. So more and more, the UK has diversified its gas sources. Piped gas obviously can only travel from point A to point B, so we're seeing increased usage of LNG in the UK's supply mix, particularly over the past kind of 2 years. So it's been extremely important. So I think we'll just take we'll focus on LNG just for a few moments. So firstly, what is LNG? So LNG, it's liquefied natural gas that's been, it's natural gas that's been supercooled into liquid form, which makes it far easier to store and to transport. The benefits of this is that LNG can go anywhere. It's mobile. It can be injected into any LNG terminal in the world. It's by no means restricted by any pipeline infrastructure. So then where does this LNG come from? So there are a few kind of key exporters. So the US is the world's #1 LNG exporter for the past couple of years, followed closely by Australia and Qatar. Qatar had historically been the world's biggest exporter for a very long time. And it's only, I think it was about 2 years ago then when the US overtook it. Who's buying the LNG? Well, Europe imported about 32% of global LNG deliveries in 2022, which is up about 12% on the previous year. I'm not sure what the latest figures are for 2023 yet, but I would bet money on it being a further increase again, considering how reliant we've been over the past year or so. Um, but also Asian buyers would tend to drive up the competition because of the demand that they have for LNG, particularly Japan and China, and then France is definitely a big importer as well. Um, and kind of a lot of our customer updates and meetings, there's always kind of a question comes up around, will Ireland get its own LNG terminal? And I think planning permission was kind of first kind of requested back in 2012. So it's been going on a very long time. And that's because there's been fierce opposition whenever anybody has tried to kind of get the ball rolling on this, from environmentalists to even American celebrities kind of tweeting um, about how we shouldn't build an LNG terminal. But the latest is that on board Planola rejected an application by US multinational New Fortress Energy to build a floating storage facility amongst other items. But the High Court has now agreed to hear the developers' challenge to that decision. So it's still very much a let's wait and see what happens. Um, Beyond LNG and pipeline supply, gas storage has been a really, really critical component of our supply makeup. Um, so uh, we get an awful lot of supply from gas that's in storage. So natural gas can be stored on a short, medium, or long-term basis. It's injected into storage facilities generally during periods of quite low demand, like during the summer, and then it's ready then to be dispatched when as needed in times of, if say the gas system is undersupplied, for strategic usage, if maybe price for importing gas is too high, or in times of unexpected high demand. Gas storage, it's also so important because it has played such a significant source of supply, particularly during the winter period, or when other sources are unreliable due to outages or geopolitical issues. The importance of storage has stepped up in particular over the past, I'd say over the past kind of 12 months, due to the embargo on Russian supply, so much so that the EU introduced a regulation whereby storage stocks needs to be at least 90% full by November 23, which was a target that was met. In fact, we were almost 100% full by November 23. And again, that target is being reintroduced again, or rather repeated again for 2024, because having such healthy storage stocks across Europe really, really helped control some volatility in the market so far this winter. Um, so at this stage, we've touched on a few fundamentals like supply and a bit about demand. So let's take a more in-depth look at what exactly is driving NBP prices. So really, it's a big puzzle. There are so many sometimes conflicting fundamentals at odds with each other. Sometimes fundamentals can be pulling prices up, some can be pulling prices down at the same time. So you really kind of need to take kind of step back and take a wider look at exactly what the key fundamentals are at any given time. So just kind of a very high level scenario of what some of these are. So start off there with system demand. So economics 101 would tell you that the higher the demand, the higher the price. So generally we would see during the winter months, during periods of high temperature driven demand, that can kind of push prices up. But similarly, during periods of low wind, gas for power demand can increase. And sometimes when you have maybe heating demand increasing as well as low wind levels, that can kind of put a bit of pressure on the system and can lead to some price increases. But similarly, even while maybe there is kind of high temperature driven demand, but wind levels are quite high, meaning that there's less pressure from the power sector for gas, that can either maybe keep prices stable or even see a bit of a fallback as well. Um, in terms of the supply picture, the supply scenario, this can also drive prices. So during periods where supply levels are quite healthy, like they have been for the past couple of months, it can definitely alleviate the upward pressure of other risks in the market. So like what's happening now, there is a lot of confidence in the supply outlook, and that's definitely grown over the winter period because the system has coped so well. And that's definitely offset some of the risk premium built into prices from some of the geopolitical factors that have been going on over the winter period as well. In terms of the wider energy complex, so coal and oil and carbon prices, but particularly oil, can have an impact. So if we see a lot of volatility on the oil market, that can definitely feed into particularly longer dated, longer term contracts on the gas curve, and that's due to the historical link between the two commodities. Then, of course, we have our geopolitical factors. So this has always been a feature of the market, but it's probably never had so much influence than over the past 2 years, I'd say. So since Russia invaded Ukraine and all the upheaval that brought, more recently, the increased tensions in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. Last year, the threat of industrial strike action at two key Australian LNG facilities. These all at the time caused a threat to either the global or local supply of natural gas, either in the short or long-term basis. And so the market built in risk premiums associated with those threats. And then finally, then we have the price differential between markets. So, for instance, if prices offered are higher in Asian markets for LNG, we usually see cargoes being redirected away from Europe in favour of the market with the higher price, which a lot of the time can be the Asian LNG spot market. Or another example, the price differential between NBP and the TTF market in the Netherlands, that can influence the volume of imports and exports between the UK and mainland Europe as well. And then I suppose actually also a high presence of renewables is also seen as a factor in terms of system demand. And the presence of renewables can take a lot of the pressure off gas power generation in terms of demand and help to bring prices down as well. So this graph, I think it just puts into context a lot of those fundamentals and also the volatility that the market has experienced over the past few years. And I suppose any customers who have been with us over that period, I know we've provided a lot of information about what's been going on. So there's just a few comments there that I've included covering the kind of major peaks kind of back in 21 and 22. But I think what's most interesting there is that you can see on the purple line there, certainly since kind of middle 2023, there was far less volatility, but really since the end of 2023, there, prices really starting to stabilize again. And then the yellow line there is starting off in 2024, when again, prices are definitely looking a lot more comfortable, and a lot of that is down to what we were talking about there. So confidence in supply, healthy storage levels. We've had a relatively mild winter, and there's been the continuation of the arrival of LNG cargoes into the UK and other key European markets as well. So there's been some minor volatility for sure, driven largely by swings between temperature-driven demand and wind levels, but otherwise the market is looking quite comfortable at current levels, as well, considering we're kind of nearly halfway through February. We're kind of coming towards the end of what is generally the most volatile period, and I think we've coped quite well in terms of our system demand and supply. So hopefully that puts us in a good position heading into the summer period, whereby we could see prices start to fall back even more, back to kind of more reasonable price levels. So all this, it might seem like an awful lot to track, which it definitely is, but Flogas do offer a suite of market reports to all our customers, but one of the more digestible ones would be the daily market commentary, which I've just included a screenshot there. So even just at a glance, without even reading through the report, you would be able to kind of get a gauge of where the market is at, if it's kind of on a downward kind of trajectory, which it kind of looks like there. And you also have a pricing table for both gas and electricity, just to kind of see the kind of day on day price differences over the past kind of week or so. So if that's something that, if you're not on that distribution list, then please get in touch with us, and that's no problem. We can add you in. Um, so then just to wrap up the gas side of things. So I just wanted to provide an overview of how best to develop your procurement strategy. So this is quite high level advice, although we have seen this approach work quite successfully for a lot of our customers. So firstly, creating an internal energy team. So remember, your account manager and the experts here at Flogas can be utilised as an extension of your own energy team. So definitely reach out to your account manager. But understanding your budget, getting input from your finance team, and setting a price trigger is a really, really good starting point. It will really help kind of build your context, the context for your budget versus what's actually going on in the market. Um, and then following on from that, then taking phased positions. So if you can, which I know some companies, it may be policy not to, but if you can take a multi-year, longer-term approach, which will help you to standardize your price in the long term. Also taking percentage positions, particularly for what would be generally the most volatile period, so winter or Q1. This will all help to avoid price shock. So if, for example, your own usage, your forecasted usage is quite high during Q1 of each year. That's generally when we see an awful lot of price volatility. Start kind of hedging small amounts if you can, 10, 25, 50% of your requirements over that period, and build up a good kind of average price for when you would kind of feel it most. Thirdly, then avoid panic buying. I know this can be difficult, particularly over the past few years when we have seen so much volatility, but generally it's best to avoid panic buying. If the market shoots up one day and you're exposed, assess what the drivers are. Speak to the team here. The market will usually correct itself after a significant spike, even if it's just to some degree, but it's always better to kind of assess, is this a price, is this a market reaction or a correction, and then take it from there. But again, your account manager and the team here can always guide you. Fourthly, don't question your decision, which is something it's always really, really difficult to do. But if you followed the previous steps and hedged for your budget, have confidence in the decision that you have made, whether or not that was hedging or floating. And just the point that's there, that floating is also a decision, and it can, a lot of times it can also be the right decision depending what way the market is, what the outlook is, what your requirements are. So it doesn't necessarily have to feel like that's your default mechanism. Finally, their communication is key. So as I've mentioned a few times already, have an open and consistent communication with your account manager. Better still, share your trigger price if you can, and that will help the experts here help you to monitor any value in the market that's there for your budget, and also just to keep an eye on the market. Everybody has a different level of kind of interest in this. So if it's a matter of signing up to the daily market commentary, just to kind of keep an eye on a daily basis. We also have our weekly commentary. Maybe that's just kind of once a week to kind of have a check in, but just have whatever works for you. Check in on the market to some degree on a regular basis to see what's going on, and reach out to your account manager if you have any questions at all. And that brings us to the end of the gas section. So I think about kind of 2 or 3 minutes here at the end, if anyone has any questions on that.
If you'd like to maybe just put into the chat, put questions in there, Joanne, and we'll pick them up there.
Yeah, actually, I'll just stop here.
I'm just going to get my slides ready to go just in this couple of minutes.
Great. Go ahead, Connor.
I think our contact details will be shared anyway. So if anyone does want any kind of follow up, that's no problem at all.
Yeah, so I guess, yeah, I suppose any questions come up in the meantime, we can address them, or we can revert back at the end maybe. But yeah, I might pick it up from here. Thanks a million for that, Joanne. Now, everyone, you're very welcome to the Power Market Essentials of this course this morning. So the aim of this course is to hopefully give you a greater understanding of how power is generated and transmitted, and also how the wholesale and forward power markets work in Ireland. So just to introduce myself, my name is Connor Fitzpatrick. I lead the trading desk here at Flogas Enterprise. And I'll be taking you through the power system fundamentals and an overview of the integrated single electricity market, which is the power market in Ireland. Then I'll hand you over to my colleague, trading analyst Michael Maloney. He'll take you through some historical prices in I-SEM, discuss some of the trends and the unique aspects of the market. And also he'll take you through future scenarios and where the market is going from here. And he'll also illustrate the correlation between the gas and power markets, which Joanne discussed earlier. Okay, so starting on power system fundamentals. Power is generated from either non-renewable or renewable sources. Unfortunately, at the moment, most of our fuel mixture is non-renewable. In Ireland, that mainly comes from natural gas. We also have coal and oil generated here in Ireland. There is also nuclear, which is a non-renewable source, which is the reaction of atoms that generates heat, that turns water into steam, which drives a turbine that generates the electricity. This is a zero carbon method of generating electricity in comparison to the fossil fuels listed above, but we don't have any nuclear generation in Ireland. But due to our interconnection with the UK and our future interconnection with France, like there will be nuclear power being imported to Ireland. Renewable sources then, I suppose the most prominent one at the moment is wind. So Ireland has quite a successful wind infrastructure at the moment. Just under 40% of our electricity demand is supplied by wind at the moment. There are a number of other renewable sources of electricity which aren't quite as prominent as wind. So we have hydro, biogas, geothermal, tidal, and I suppose one talking point over the next few years will be the growth of solar power in Ireland. And we have seen the effectiveness of solar power in other European markets with a similar climate to Ireland. So at the moment, 680 megawatts of solar power is installed in the country, and Ireland has some ambitious climate action targets. So this 680 megawatts the target is to grow that to 8 gigawatts by the end of this decade. The 8 gigawatts in comparison to the current wind infrastructure we have, which is about 5.5 gigawatts. And just to put that into context, the peak all island demand of the island of Ireland is just over 6 gigawatts at peak times, and overnight it's just under 4 gigawatts. So there's definitely a huge potential for solar to play a huge part in our fuel mix by the end of the decade. Okay, just to illustrate the fuel mix here, this is the all-island fuel mix from 2022. This was published by AirGrid. Now, the 2023 figures are available, but just the official report hasn't been published yet by AirGrid. So renewables accounted for 38.2% of Ireland's fuel mix this is the all Ireland figure. I believe the 40.6% here is the Republic of Ireland figure. So the 2020 target was 40%. So I suppose we're just about at the 2020 targets. And as I mentioned earlier, by the end of the decade, the 2030 target is to have 80% of our electricity generated by renewable sources. So you can see there within the renewable section here, we have the vast majority of it is made up by wind, and then a tiny amount, 0.3%, is solar, which will grow significantly over the next few years. And we also have hydro there and some other renewable sources. Natural gas, obviously, being the dominant fuel source in the fuel mix there. This graph illustrates the inputs into the fuel inputs into our electricity system and the outputs. So here we have hydro, other renewables, wind, natural gas, other fossil fuels down here. These will be the inputs into the fuel mix. Now, a good chunk of what's put into the grid is actually lost from generation and transformation losses, and about 60% there will actually be consumed as electricity. One thing to note, it's maybe not quite so easy to see from the graph, but in terms of wind and other renewable sources, the efficiency is actually nearly 1-to-1 in terms of fuel input to output, whereas with fossil fuels, there's an efficiency factor of about 50%. So if you put X amount of energy from natural gas as an input to generate electricity, you'll only actually get about 50% of that energy at the other end as electricity. So there is a lot of losses there from generation and transformation. But yeah, wind and other renewable sources are definitely more efficient in terms of getting the maximum from the input from the final electricity output. Okay. Alongside generation on the island of Ireland, we also have a number of interconnectors live. Currently, there's interconnection between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and with Great Britain, with mainland Great Britain. So I suppose the two predominant ones would be the EWIC, which is the east-west interconnector between the Republic of Ireland and Wales. So the capacity there is 500 megawatts. We also have Moyle between Northern Ireland and Scotland. That's another 500 megawatts of interconnection. And future interconnection is a bit more exciting. So we do have another north-south interconnector with a bidirectional flow of 900 megawatts between the Republic and Northern Ireland. That's not due to be completed for another couple of years. In the near future, we have another interconnector with Wales under construction, which is an extra 500 megawatts of capacity between Republic of Ireland and Wales. The latest due date for that interconnector is kind of end of 2024. And then I suppose the most exciting one is this Celtic interconnector that's currently being built, which is a 700 megawatt capacity between the Republic of Ireland and France. That's currently under construction at the moment. And just to give these megawatt values some context, the Greenlink capacity there, 500 megawatts, is the kind of equivalent of powering about 380,000 homes. And 700 megawatts there for the Celtic interconnector, that's the equivalent of powering 450,000 homes. So why do we need interconnection? I mean, we're a small island market. We do have plenty of renewable sources to generate indigenously, but greater interconnection with other markets brings better energy security if the wind isn't blowing, if the sun isn't shining, more competitive pricing, and yeah, it allows a greater utilization of the renewable sources that are generated across the continent. So there are plenty of times where Ireland is generating far more wind than it can consume. So greater interconnection with other markets means that wind isn't going to waste. We can export it to other markets and make revenue there. So there is actually a limit of the amount of renewable sources that can be used at any one time. At the moment, it's about 75% of the total island demands can be consumed from renewable sources. And that 75% figure is actually one of the highest figures in Europe. So Ireland actually is a sort of a world leader in utilization of its renewable sources. Okay, I'm just going to give a little bit more detail on the Celtic interconnector. So this will be Ireland's only physical connection to the EU after Brexit. This will strengthen the security of supply between Ireland and France. And yeah, as I said there, it's an important milestone for Ireland's journey towards being an energy exporter. So as we develop our solar and wind infrastructure with greater interconnection, we'll be able to become a net exporter, which, you know, from an energy security point of view and from a financial point of view, it's a huge asset to have. So the total length of this interconnector is going to be 575 kilometers. For context, it will be one of the longest interconnectors in Europe. At the moment, the longest in Europe is the Viking Line between the UK and Denmark, which is 765 kilometers in length. So the capacity here for the Celtic interconnector will be 700 megawatts. And again, just for context, that's just about half the capacity of the Viking Line between UK and Denmark. Excuse me. Okay, so next I'm going to discuss transmission because in the graph earlier, I showed that about 40% of the fuel input is lost through transmission and generation losses. So at the very start, we have where the electricity is generated at the source. So the fuels would be either burnt or where steam is generated before being distributed initially through transmission lines. We have a very high voltage here to begin with because the higher the voltage, the less energy is actually wasted through heat. So you'll see here as we go through receiving stations and we get more to a more local level, sub-transmission lines, we have a far lower voltage here. So again, this is just reducing voltage, transforming it to be more readily handled for domestic use. Until the point where we get to the most local distribution lines of 12,000 volts. So that's about 5% of the initial voltage coming from the electricity generating station. So there's a lot of transformation that goes on between the point where the electricity is generated and to where it's finally consumed, either in your business or in your home. So all of this is necessary to keep that transmission loss at just 40%. Because obviously we don't want to be losing energy through heat through electricity cables. I'll just briefly show this map of the transmission network in Ireland. So we have the highest voltage lines there would connect to major urban centres, Dublin to the west coast there, and then kind of working downwards in terms of voltage, we have 275 kilovolt lines operating in Northern Ireland, 220 kilovolts kind of operating at a regional level in the Republic of Ireland, and then going down to more local levels, we have the smaller 110 kilovolt lines. So that just illustrates the gradual transformation of voltage as electricity comes from the source to where it's finally consumed. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick sip here before moving on to the I-SEM overview. So this section is going to focus more so on the actual market functionality in Ireland. So I-SEM is a market that came into operation in October 2018 after Brexit, and this is an all island market between the Republic and Northern Ireland. So yeah, it's a wholesale electricity arrangement active since 2018. It was the aim for this was to integrate the all-island electricity market with European electricity markets, and the benefits will include a more cohesive market, which in theory should put more downward pressure on prices. With Ireland being geographically remote as an island market, we're not seeing the full benefit yet, but as I alluded to earlier, better interconnection with the rest of Europe will help put downward pressure on prices and encourage greater access to renewables across Europe. And we also have this critical point of encouraging less waste by introducing balancing responsibility, which I'll discuss in the next slide. So just before I discuss balance and responsibility, just to highlight the key participants in I-SEM. So we have the generators who actually generate the electricity and put it out into the grid. We have suppliers, which is where Flogas Enterprise come in. The network, which is EirGrid and ESB, who look after the transmission and distribution of the electricity and are responsible for all of the electrical infrastructure nationwide. And then we have the regulator, the CRU, and the main responsibility of the CRU are to basically ensure that the electricity market is performing as intended, and that prices are fair and reasonable, and that safety standards are adhered to, safety and environmental standards are adhered to. From Flogas Enterprises' perspective, as a supplier, we're not trying to profit directly from trading activities in the market. There are non-suppliers and assetless traders who do participate in I-SEM, whose primary goal is to purely make profit, just as they might do in any other sort of financial market. For us, we offer access to wholesale and forward pricing to our customers directly. And the function of the trading desk here at Flogas Enterprise is to manage demand and generation forecasting, and as a result, mitigating the balancing risk, which I'm going to go into detail shortly. So there are a number of markets that we trade in, both financial and physical. So we have two ex-ante energy markets, which would be day ahead and intraday. The balancing market, which is a huge piece in I-SEM, and then all of these markets operate independently and on different timelines. So on forwards, we do offer forward trading to our customers for both power and gas, usually up to about 2 years in advance of dispatch. So customers who are on a wholesale price with Flogas Enterprise are guaranteed the day ahead price, which is more stable compared to the balancing price, which Michael will illustrate later. Flogas Enterprise, as a supplier, we actually take the balancing risk, so our customers aren't exposed to the volatility here. And just to echo what Joanne spoke about earlier in terms of developing a procurement strategy, the principles of procuring gas, and they apply to power as well. So if you are interested in fixing in power or gas in the forward market, do get in touch with your account manager, and we'll liaise with you to give you some indicative pricing, and if you'd like to fix in a portion of your usage. Okay, just to show a bit more detail on the physical markets then, day ahead would be the most liquid market, and about 80% of all electricity volume in Ireland is traded at day ahead level. This closes at 11 a.m. Irish time, the day before delivery, and the main price drivers of day ahead prices would be UK gas and the amount of wind available. Intraday markets are similar to day ahead. They allow traders to adjust their positions closer to real time. You know, if there's an unscheduled outage from a fossil generator or a wind plant, traders can either sell back or buy back their position at intraday level. And then the balancing market is a bit different. It's not done as an auction the way day ahead and intraday is. This is simply a number of steps taken by the transmission system operator to keep the system balanced and to make sure that the latency of the system is at a safe 50 hertz. And the action, as I'll go into on the next slide, we see here the balancing market is coordinated by the two TSOs, EirGrid and Sony, which EirGrid would be responsible in the Republic of Ireland and Sony being responsible in Northern Ireland. So generators offer their services to keep the grid balanced, just to make sure that demand is exactly equal to generation at each time. Electricity, when transmitted through the grid, it travels at it travels at essentially the speed of light. So as soon as electricity is generated, it more or less has to be consumed instantly. So the balancing mechanism is really important to reduce waste. So there are a number of actions taken by the two TSOs here to make sure that the amount of electricity being generated is exactly the same as the amount of electricity being consumed at all times. And any actions taken will cause the imbalanced price. And obviously this leads to a lot more volatility compared to the day-ahead market. In contrast, suppliers bid into the day-ahead market based on their forecast demand. And on the contrary, generators offer based on their availability. So depending on volume and price levels, the day-ahead price is eventually set by where the volumes and prices intersect between suppliers and generators. Okay, moving on to coupled markets. We see that the idea of a European single market, which would have 20 countries coupled by 38 cross-border interconnectors, total generating capacity there of 3,000 terawatt hours. So for context there, that's Ireland's peak demand is about 6 gigawatts. So really scratching the surface of the total volume of electricity consumed within the rest of Europe. There's a common set of rules and standardized wholesale trading arrangements between all of these coupled markets. And there's a common price coupling algorithm for scheduling day-ahead markets and interconnector flows. So just to illustrate some of the variances between different markets, ideally, electricity flows from cheaper regions into more expensive regions, and the theory is that with greater interconnection, there's more of a singular European power price at day-ahead level. Now, obviously, there's some discrepancies here. Here we have an example where Ireland is quite low in price compared to the UK. This was a very high wind day, for example, so Ireland had excess wind and was exporting to the UK. Now, generally, it's reported fairly frequently that Ireland is in general a more expensive market, which is true. Again, that's due to our physical remote location and the fact that we're a small island market. When the wind isn't blowing, we're heavily dependent on fossil fuel imports. We have up here in the north of Norway and Sweden, we have areas that are quite low in price compared to the more populated regions here. That's because there's an abundance of hydropower in the north of Norway and Sweden, which would be predominantly exporting to the markets to their south. And then in contrast, here we have the import-dependent regions of the south of Finland, and we have Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, all very dependent on importing fossil fuels, which is why we see far higher prices here compared to the rest of Europe. Okay, finally from me, just to tie back to the Celtic interconnector. So this will increase our integration with European markets by 2026. Will lead to Ireland once again being physically connected with the European energy markets after being isolated due to Brexit. And yeah, after the redesign of the market in 2018, another revision will be necessary to allow efficient trading and to comply with EU requirements. So at the moment, just as an example, our day-ahead market is settled hourly in comparison to the rest of Europe, which is settled half-hourly. So the Irish day-ahead market will be moving to half-hourly settlement at day-ahead level. And on top of the day ahead, we will be fully coupled with European markets for each of the 3 IDA auctions and the continuous market there. Okay, at this point, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand over to Michael Maloney to discuss I-SEM prices and market trends and uniqueness.
Thanks a million, Connor.
Yeah.
I'll share my screen there over. So you can let me know if you can see my slides there.
Yeah, you're there, yeah.
Thanks. So as Connor mentioned, I'm going to take you through the final 2 sections of the power trading, which is firstly prices, what's unique about the market, and trends that we've seen in recent years. So firstly, we see the last 2 years of our day ahead wholesale power pricing on the island of Ireland. We can see the year 2022 was trading an awful lot higher than what we've seen in the last 12 months. This is mainly due to, as what Joanne mentioned earlier, about premiums being built into the gas prices, which inevitably fed into our electricity pricing, as the price of electricity is more often not determined by the price of wholesale NBP gas. So in 2023 there you can see the range is roughly between €223 to €56 for an average day until December, where we've seen a big drop there just at the end of our curve on that graph there. So that was due to higher wind levels and a lowering of wholesale gas prices and forward contracts. And also just noteworthy, on the 24th, a price of €19 per megawatt hour was achieved, and that was the lowest since 2020. So this is the graph that will also represent what we previously mentioned, with an almost perfect correlation that exists between UK NBP gas prices and the Irish day-ahead power price. The green curve in the background represents the overall wind levels, which has a dampening effect on our day-ahead market pricing. We can see the wind also has a significant impact, whether it's low. So we can see prices here, wind volumes are very low there in June 23, and then the opposite is true for December there at the very end of the graph, where you see that dotted box. So that was so on our imbalance prices, we can see this blue curve here is just a typical day of day-ahead market prices. We can see a lowering of prices overnight. This is normally due to a lower demand. So FES shoulders the balancing risk on any inaccuracies in our forecasting when purchasing power in the day-ahead market, which will then spill into the imbalance price, which you can see is quite volatile in comparison. With prices peaking during the afternoon, this is the time demand is at its highest. It's very difficult to forecast what the balanced market will outturn at, as prices are produced algorithmically based on system circumstances on real time. And this will act whether the system is over or undersupplied. So the impact of wind on daily pricing. This is a very nice graph just showing the relationship between wind volumes and day-ahead market pricing. So where wind volumes are higher, we can see that our day-ahead prices are trading much lower, and when wind volumes are lower, we can see an increase in our daily pricing. So they have a negative relationship, negative correlation, apart from the 5th here, which was a bank holiday weekend. So that could be due to the bank holiday and the inaccuracy in our forecasting. When our constraints and curtailments, the graph on the top right shows all island wind generation in blue for each year. The dispatch down in orange signifies the potential renewable power from wind that was lost due to the physical network not being able to handle that increased generation coming online. The trouble with large amount of wind generation is the unpredictability of the weather. When wind levels are high, all or most wind farms are also exporting, which can lead to this bottleneck effect of power flowing through the grid, and what's produced cannot be transported through the transmission network. 2 important definitions here are the constraints and curtailments. constraints occur due to the limited ability of the localized network. So that's very much like a distribution or a local transmission level, and its ability to take the wind energy being produced. And network operators can call on wind generators to ramp down, or they get automatically shut off when wind is high. Curtailments act in the same way, but the scope is much larger as it focuses on the entire system or the entire island of Ireland. The second graph shows constrained and curtailed volumes for a typical day. It can be curtailed for different reasons. The transmission network needs to be maintained at a frequency of 50 Hz, and the TSO or air grid will try and balance this to get as close to 50 Hz as possible. So it'll undulate between 49.5 and 50.5 normally, and or high SNSP limit, which Connor already mentioned, which we'll look at next. So following on, our SNSP is essentially the amount of renewable generation on the system at any one time. As of 2021, the limit was 75%, and this means that the power generated from renewables can only go as high as 75% at any one time, with 25% being conventional or fossil power generation. 75% is in place to facilitate the current limits of the transmission system, with the aim of increasing this limit in future years. With EirGrid's goal there, it's 95% by 2030. And this is just displaying the same, where a lot of wind farms are located on the areas of lower population density. As we can see, the population, of lower population density, whereas demand belongs to the areas with the lowest amount of renewable generation present. On the left, we can see the wind farms are mainly in the west coast or around the country, due to the population density, and also belonging to large energy users. As you can see by our fuel mix here, gas is still a major component in our annual fuel mix up until 2022 there. It will remain the fuel of choice for any new build fossil generation facilities, whether it be backup or flexible generation. We can see oil is almost phased out, and coal has increased in recent years due to plants being called back upon to help alleviate undersupply. So that, namely Money Point, which is a coal-fired plant being brought back online, although it was closed a few years ago. We see a small reduction in the share of renewables in the fuel mix for 2021. This is mainly due to the increased level of demand after COVID, that necessitated more fossil generation to come online. And here is our terawatt historical peak demand. A new peak in demand was reached on the 18th of January, only last month, for the Republic of Ireland. The main driver of this peak was cold weather, and we can note the higher and higher peaks in electricity demand on the right over the years, with a few dips, mainly caused by economic activity. And for our last part, we're going to look at our future scenarios and targets. So government targets for under the Government Climate Action Plan 2023, which was published last year. Targets were set for renewables to be met in 2025 and 2030. We can see the renewable electricity share is projected to be 50% in 2025 and 80% in 2030. We can see other renewable growth targets for onshore and offshore wind, solar, and flexible gas power plants, and the growth of CPPAs are also mentioned for business sourcing a proportion of their energy from renewable sources. So what you can see is a projection of how these different renewable energy sources are expected to grow over the coming years. Not much growth is forecasted for the fuels such as waste, biomass, or hydro. For example, hydro, a lot of the potential has already been used for hydroelectricity. Main growth focus still remains on onshore and offshore wind and solar, as you can see there in the pink, purple, and yellow. And so for conventional generation, looking at the graph here on the left, we can see the gradual percentage drop in conventional generation capacity from January 2018 up as far as January 23. This essentially denotes the availability of gas and other fossil generators available to turn on when needed, and this has been dropping consistently for both ROI and NI. To help alleviate this drop in conventional generation available on the system, the Commission for Regulation of Utilities, or the CRU, has made plans for new gas-fired plants and will help increase this percentage availability. This is important as new generators will be required to replace older plants that are close to being decommissioned or closed. This will ensure that generators are available to meet demand. So we have 2,000 megawatts of flexible gas-fired generation, hopefully built by 2030, 650 megawatts of emergency capacity, and the extension of older and close to closure plants that their life cycle has been extended due to lack of availability on the grid. And and the changing nature of demand throughout the system. We previously looked at forecasted changes in the renewable fuel mix. This graph helps us picture the changing nature of electricity demand. We're going to see a large increase in the demand from in electrical vehicles, or EV HGVs, heat pumps and data centers in the coming years as transport becomes electrified further. And that's just our total energy requirement. So there's a following a path of a gap between all of our demand and our total energy required. And challenges arising from the increase. So future challenges will include the increased reliance on renewables, which will namely be wind and solar here, as output is less controllable and predictable than fossil power generation. Older generators being phased out, with some running longer than expected, with new plants required to replace these in coming years. Another challenge is the gap between growing renewables and system demand. As more energy, renewable energy comes online, demand will also move upward. This reinforces the necessity for interconnection with the UK and Europe, as Conor already mentioned. This will enable the market to become more competitive and dynamic, as we can import and export depending on market circumstances. Finally, there will be planning and infrastructure challenges that will affect when these projects actually come to fruition and are finished, and whether we don't meet our decarbonisation targets by 2030. And that's all. Thanks very much.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that. Thanks, Joanne and Conor. That was great. We flew through it for some reason, which is great. So if anybody has any questions, you want to stick them into the chat there, Joanne, Conor, Michael will answer them. I see Joanne has already answered a few there. So or if you want to send an email to myself, any of the presenters or your account manager, we'll happily answer there. But thank you all very much for coming along, and hope you all got something from it. We'll just give you a couple of minutes there if you want to put in questions. Okay, I think that's it. I don't see anybody typing there. So thank you very much for all for coming along, and take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.